With fears of a rising global epidemic, if not a pandemic, there are hard questions to ponder. How far could this virus go? Can humans learn to deal with nature's wrath? Can humans learn to coexist with nature? We may find some clues with Jane Goodall's story, the famous English primatologist and also anthropologist. Her story, being alone in the African forest, living side by side with chimpanzees, has spread far and wide. She made us realize the planet should not be dominated just by humans, but is home we need to share with all the other creatures. That simple message is more easily said than done. That's why Ms. Goodall spends much of the year traveling around the world. Even now, in her 80s, she never tires to advocate for conservation. Now, let's meet her, Jane Goodall. Whoever that is, whether chimpanzee or human being, they all have their very different personalities.
Absolutely.
So, what exactly is this special relationship you had with Mr. David Greybeard, the chimpanzee?
David Greybeard was the first chimpanzee who lost his fear of this peculiar white ape, which is what I was. They'd never seen a white ape before. And so gradually, because he got used to me, I'd approach a group in the forest. They were all ready to run as usual. And then they would see David sitting calmly, and they'd look from him to me and back. And I suppose they thought, well, she can't be so dangerous after all. So he really introduced me to his friends out in the forest. David was gentle.
Really?
He was a born leader, not because he was aggressive in getting to the top, but because he was so quick to reassure that the young ones would want to follow him, just because he was a good chap to be around.
Did you try to communicate with him about that community that which you became part of?
No, you can't. I never tried to communicate with them. On the other hand, on one occasion when I was following him through the forest, I thought I'd lost him, and then I had to crawl through this tangle of vines and stuff, and he was sitting almost as though waiting for me. And so I sat down near him, and there was a ripe palm nut on the ground, so I held it towards him, and he turned away. He obviously didn't want it, so I put my hand closer, and he looked directly into my eyes. He took the nut, he dropped it, he didn't want it, but very gently squeezed my fingers. That's how chimpanzees reassure each other. So in that one moment, we communicated with each other in a language that surely predates human words.
Have you ever seen him again once you left?
He died before I left. I mean, I was at Gombe from 1960 to 1986. I was in the forest most of that time. And already David he disappeared during an epidemic of something like pneumonia.
Are you a member of the community you were
No.
thinking, or you were a researcher whom they took as a member of the community?
No.
Have you drawn that line always clear, or it's actually very blurred?
The line between us and them is very blurred. But I never tried to get into their community. I just wanted their trust, so that they let me. It was like sitting, almost looking through a window. They trusted me. They knew I wasn't a member of their community. I didn't try and communicate with them. But they didn't mind me wandering about. I wasn't harming them. And so I was able to learn the secrets of their lives. I think I learned about that as a child when I was up in my tree daydreaming, up as close to the birds as I could get, out with my dog, watching birds. We had a little wilderness near us. So out in the forest, I didn't really learn much about myself, but I did have opportunity to feel one with nature, and that was just a magical feeling. I think it comes close to Zen meditation.
When you have a moment to yourself when you are visiting Gombe, what would you do?
Well, I visit Gombe twice a year, and I always go out in the forest, and I always insist on one day when I'm out in the forest by myself to renew my spirit. It's spiritual food for me to be out in that forest that I love so much.
But what was it like for you as a researcher in the wild in Africa at that time?
As I got to know the chimpanzees better and could sit with them for long hours, and then they began to allow me to actually follow them, it was the attainment of my childhood dream. It was very hard work. The country at Gombe is very hilly, so there's a lot of climbing steep slopes and quite often losing chimpanzees. We now have African field staff to help, and they're really, really, really good at climbing up and down the steep slopes, but I did my best. Was very often with chimpanzees all day, and I especially loved following mothers and their families and watching the development of infants and learning that there are good mothers and bad mothers just as there are in human society.
What are good mothers and bad mothers acting like?
Well, the good mother is protective, but not overprotective. She's affectionate, she's playful. Above all, most important, she's supportive. And she will run in to protect her child, even though she may get into trouble herself. And that was exactly like my mother.
At the time when you were doing the research, there was also debate going on elsewhere in the world when you are bringing out some of the details of your research and observations. People are saying, well, it's not academic enough. Others are saying, well, she probably has different purposes when she went into the wild. There were also others saying, well, you know, she's got just the opportunity that none of us could have access to. Therefore, she's got what she had.
I was described as the geographic cover girl. That's how I was described. And
I remember that title.
Yes, she's got there because, you know, she's not bad looking, and so her research is useless because she's too anthropomorphic. But you see, fortunately, I never wanted to be a scientist. When I went out to Gombe, I hadn't been to college. I didn't know what was going to happen. I saved up my money. I got to Africa. I had this luck, or whatever, of meeting Louis Leakey, and he's the one who gave me this opportunity to go and be with chimpanzees. So at that time, I didn't have another world. But after about 2 years, Louis wrote to me and said, I won't always be around to get money for you. You're going to have to get a degree. We don't have time to mess about with a BA. You're going to have to go straight for a PhD. I've got your place in Cambridge University. To do a PhD in ethology. I didn't even know what ethology was. I'd never been to college. So when I got there, I was a bit nervous, as you can probably imagine. And to be told by these professors that I'd done everything wrong. I shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. They should have had numbers. That would be scientific. I couldn't talk about them having personalities, minds capable of thought, and certainly not emotions, because those were unique to humans. But luckily, as a child, I had a teacher who taught me that for all their learning, these professors were completely wrong. And that teacher was my dog, Rusty. And you can't share your life in a meaningful way with a dog or a cat or a rabbit or a horse, I don't care what it is, and not know that of course animals have personalities. But thank goodness, because chimpanzees are biologically so like us, I was able to break that perception and help people, including science, to realize we are part of and not separated from the rest of the animal kingdom, and we should treat the other animals with a lot more respect and understanding.
Shall we focus our attention on one species for campaigns so that people pay attention to this species and the protection of it? Therefore, more attention will be paid to nature conservation. Or we need to spread our attention, our resources, to more species, and yet less focused when it comes to campaigns?
I think the lucky thing is that different people are passionate about different animals. And there's enough money out there and enough resources, and especially our young people, our roots and shoots groups, high school, university, they're actually doing an awful lot for particular animals. And you know, who are we to say this animal is more important than that? Fortunately for me, chimpanzees live in the rainforest like the orangutans and the gibbons. And if we protect the rainforest for the chimpanzee home, we're protecting the home of hundreds and thousands of other species as well. And that's always good. And usually, if you protect the habitat for this particular species, you are helping many other species as well.
There are debates. For example, panda, the giant panda, getting a lot of attention, a lot of resources for protection, not only here, all over the world. Is that the best way?
Well, I know there's a lot of controversy about pandas, and now people are making money. You know, pandas are exported to zoos who pay huge amounts of money to have them because people go to see them. So in a way, you can say they're being exploited. And I definitely think that efforts to conserve the panda in the natural habitat are good. And if one way is to get money from pandas going off to America and getting hundreds of thousands of dollars to have the panda over there, if it's going to be looked after well, and if that's going to help the pandas in the wild, then I think it's not a bad thing. I don't think captive pandas are very unhappy if they're kept in the right environment.
Thank you so much, Dane, for being with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me to your program.